What if the South had won the American Civil War? Imagine this. The Confederate flag soars high over half of what we now call the United States, a stark reminder of a moment in history that veered onto an entirely different course. The Civil War wasn't just the bloodiest conflict in American history, it was a battle for the soul of a nation. But what if that soul had been divided? What if the South had emerged victorious, walking away from the battlefield with its independence intact and its way of life preserved? Before we start, we want to hear your thoughts on this intriguing possibility. Drop your theories in the comments, and if you enjoy deep dives into alternate history, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future explorations. To understand this alternate timeline, we first need to envision the turning points that could have led to a Southern victory. Perhaps their victory at the Battle of Antietam could have drawn European nations, such as Britain or France, to officially join their cause. Alternatively, if General Robert E. Lee had been more successful at Gettysburg, the momentum could have swung decisively in the South's favor. In this scenario, the Union, worn down by prolonged warfare and lacking sufficient political resolve, agrees to peace talks. The result? A divided nation, two separate countries emerge, the United States of America to the north and the Confederate States of America to the south. So what happens next? In the months and years following a Confederate victory, the South would focus on solidifying its independence. Slavery, the foundation of its economy, would remain intact, creating a society shaped by extreme racial inequality and institutionalized oppression. The Confederacy would likely build its government around the preservation of this system, cementing its legacy as the slave-owning republic. The Union, meanwhile, would take a drastically different approach. Defeated, but determined, the North would focus on healing its wounds and rebuilding its economy. Having lost the Southern states, the Union would turn inward, doubling down on industrialization and innovation as it fought to regain its stature on the world stage. The question of borders would loom large. Would the two nations develop a tense but stable peace, or would they be locked into a Cold War-esque rivalry? The Mason-Dixon line would evolve from an ideological divide into a literal one, a heavily guarded frontier separating two rival powers. Economically, the South would struggle in the short term. Its reliance on slavery and agriculture would leave it lagging far behind the Industrial Revolution that was gaining momentum worldwide. While the Confederacy might thrive on cotton exports in the immediate years after the war, it would quickly face challenges. Nations like Britain, though initially supportive, would eventually move toward abolishing slavery and might distance themselves from the Confederate economy. In contrast, the Union, freed from the need to accommodate Southern agricultural interests, would likely become a hub of innovation. With its focus on manufacturing, finance, and transportation infrastructure, the Union might modernize far more rapidly, becoming the industrial powerhouse of North America, and quite possibly the world. Trade wars between the two Americas could become frequent, further complicating their relationship. The Confederacy's heavy reliance on cash crops and slave labor would make its economy brittle and vulnerable to changes in global markets or technological advancements. Meanwhile, the North, driven by free labor and economic diversification, could surge ahead in wealth and international influence, ultimately creating a stark economic imbalance. A Confederate victory would deepen the political and social rift between two Americas. The most immediate and tragic consequence would be the South's continued reliance on slavery. While the global abolitionist movement would eventually challenge this institution, the Confederacy would likely resist these pressures well into the 20th century, creating lasting tension both domestically and internationally. The situation might give rise to significant internal conflicts within the South. Class divides between the wealthy plantation elite and lower-class Southern whites could widen as the Confederacy's rigid agrarian economy fails to support all its citizens. Rebel movements, both among enslaved populations and poor white laborers, could create political instability over time. In the Union, the political landscape would evolve along a different trajectory. Without the need to compromise with Southern lawmakers, the North would likely pass progressive legislation more swiftly, spurring advancements in labor rights, education, and social equality. However, the psychological effects of losing to the Confederacy could weigh heavily on Northern society, fostering nationalism and a desire to prove their strength on the global stage. The global implications of two American nations would be profound. Would the South's victory embolden aristocracies and pro-slavery factions in Europe and elsewhere? Or would the Confederacy's resistance to progress serve as a cautionary tale for nations striving toward modernization? Meanwhile, the Union's position as a world power might evolve faster in this timeline, as it funnels resources into industrial development and international trade. However, without the combined strength of a unified America, both the North and South would be politically weaker on the global stage. Would European powers exploit this division? Could the fractured United States inspire a wave of colonization or territorial ambitions from other nations? Looking further into the future, the long-term societal impacts of a Confederate victory raise troubling questions. How long could the institution of slavery realistically last in a world increasingly moving toward moral and economic reform? While it's possible that external pressure or internal rebellion could eventually dismantle the Confederacy's system of slavery, the broader culture of racial segregation and inequality might persist for generations, creating an even deeper legacy of division and injustice. In the Union, the absence of Southern influence could accelerate the push toward technological innovation, urbanization, and social reform. The resulting disparity between the two nations, a forward-looking North and a regressive South, might even create an incentive for reunification over the decades. However, such an outcome would likely be fraught with challenges, as both nations would have evolved vastly different political systems and cultural identities. If the South had won, what would the United States, or more accurately the divided Americas, look like in 2023? The Confederacy might remain a struggling agricultural economy, heavily reliant on outdated systems and industries. Culturally, it would be a nation marked by rigid traditions and a hesitancy to adapt to global changes. Meanwhile, the Union could very well be a thriving global leader, its innovation and industrialization fueling a society far more advanced than its Southern counterpart. Cities like New York, Chicago, and Boston would become even more prominent as hubs of art, finance, and technology. However, could the absence of unity compromise both nations' ability to project power on the global stage? Would rising competitors like China or Russia benefit from the division of the United States? The cultural divide would also shape the modern identity of both nations. Where the Union might pursue inclusivity, progress, and diversification, the Confederate States could become increasingly isolated and insular. The ideological chasm between the two Americas might be as vast as the geographic gulf that separates them. The alternate history of a Confederate victory in the Civil War is both fascinating and chilling. From politics to economics, the ripple effects of this one moment would undeniably alter the trajectory of the United States and the world for generations to come. But this discussion is just the beginning. What's your take? Would the Confederacy eventually collapse under the weight of its outdated systems? Could the Union rise even higher without the South dragging it down? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy exploring the what-ifs of history with us, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There's a whole universe of alternate possibilities to explore, and we can't wait to dissect them with you.